we'll get things started. So Matt Cordell, the undead cop, is back for Maniac Cop 2, and he's still seeking justice against those that murdered him in prison, which in turn reveals some dirty politician activity along the way. I'd like to, talk more about the plot, but to be honest, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So Maniac Cop 2, I think it's a sequel that is as good as the original. It may not be as suspenseful because we kind of know about the character now, as we didn't so much in the original, but whatever they lack in that area, they provide more action. I think it's a little more refined. Cordell, we see a lot more of him this time, and he's got some interesting makeup. I think he's quite a underrated slasher figure in the horror genre. Even to this day, I think he's still a little underrated and doesn't get talked about as much as he should.
I just want to say sort of one quick thing about this one. I thought it was almost as good as the original movie, the first movie, with the exception of, I forget what the character's name is off the top of my head, but there's an actor here, Leo Rousey, who plays just a very talkative serial killer. Seems almost, to me, he's almost used purely for comedic effect. And that guy pretty much got on my nerves as soon as he first appeared. And just trying to talk to Cordell, just keeps talking, and Cordell's just sitting there. I just did not care for those scenes. So had they maybe changed the dynamics a little, or done something differently, I might have enjoyed that more.
I think just to cut in, I'm thinking the reason is because they wanted someone really talkative. Obviously, because Cordell doesn't speak, and
well, apparently he does.
Oh well, he kind of like utters his name in the movie, but aside from that, and he really struggled to let that out. But aside from that, he is actually featured a lot in scenes in this movie, and I guess to avoid a lot of silence, they needed someone who would, be talking.
I admit I probably would have been okay with the silence, but that is, otherwise, I pretty much agree with Chucky. I think this is a really enjoyable movie. There's somewhat surprising scenes throughout. There's a lot of exciting scenes. So, generally speaking, I think it's enjoyable. Just that one thing just annoyed the hell out of me. But so, what, Chucky, about this movie speaks to you?
I just think how much cooler it is. It's just got some really cool action scenes. Like, for instance, there's a scene where he stops a chainsaw with his hand, and he just and you kind of expect more of a fight, but as soon as he does that, and then he just kind of snaps her neck straight away, unexpectedly, really fast.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a pretty surprising death, in my opinion.
Mainly because that death scene involves a prominent character from the first movie, and who we thought would at least make it through to the end of this entire movie. So
I didn't even think the first one, from the first movie, was going to die as that character did. So, that newspaper, near the newspaper stand, that scene took me completely by surprise.
Yeah, they're not overly gory kills. They're sort of violent, but yeah, pretty decent kills in the movie. So we've got Bruce Campbell. He was obviously, I think the idea was that he didn't want to do or continue the movie, but he was in it just to kind of, bring some closure, I guess, to his character.
Which is probably a very good idea, because some sequels feel somewhat disconnected from the first movies, but this one feels like a direct continuation, and I thought they did a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, and they essentially replace his character with a new one played by Robert Davi, who is one of my more favorite actors. I can pretty much watch him in anything that he's in, because he usually plays really good villains. He was one of the best James Bond villains, to my memory. Even though not everyone loves License to Kill, I think it's the best James Bond movie out there. And I'm not a huge James Bond movie fan.
Moonraker for the win. So.
Anywho, but yeah, I mean, his involvement is also a big plus for me because I like him in a lot of different movies that he's in.
Yeah, I also wanted to point out there was one character toward the second half of the movie. Guy who played him was Clarence Williams III, who's a decently well-known black actor. He is a very recognizable face, and he also appeared in what's probably one of the best horror anthologies of the 1990s, titled Tales from the Horde. So it's interesting seeing him here about 5 years earlier. And I know that you're not necessarily a big anthology horror movie fan, but just wanted to point that out for anybody who may be. Plus, who could miss the 1 second cameo of Danny Trejo? Like as soon as I saw that mask, I'm like, hey, is that Danny Trejo? I mean, who else could it be though?
Yeah, playing the role that he was born to play. Oh well, I mean, he's made it really far, so kudos to him.
I also wanted to point out just one last thing. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is probably the shooting range scene. I thought the way that was filmed was pretty fantastic, and I think you pretty much know what's coming. But I really, that's probably one of my favorite, I guess, quote-unquote massacres in the movie. And that's, for that scene alone, I was pretty impressed.
Yeah, and I don't remember the details surrounding this, but that was actually quite a notorious scene. I think it had a lot of trouble getting passed by the, what do they call it, the MPAA?
I can imagine so.
Yeah, they, I think it was probably cut in a lot of different versions, and it took a while to get that uncut. So yeah, it's definitely a really cool scene in the movie.
I mean, and of course the prison sequence toward the end is also pretty good. He's just going through the prison, killing half the people. I mean, it's some pretty good fun.
Yeah, a pretty epic fire stunt at the end, which is actually surpassed by an even better fire stunt at the end of part 3, but we'll talk about that later.
Is that one of the few positive things people say about part 3?
To be honest, part 3 is still a decent movie. It's not bad. It's just not as good as this one. I mean, some people talk about it like it's a terrible movie. It certainly has its problems, but it's... I think if you're a fan of the first 2, you're still going to enjoy the third one. Just maybe not as much.
Yeah, I'll just say one other thing. And this is a very small thing, but I always appreciate a nice death sequence. And this, the shooting range was one of my favorites. But there's a really quick one. Just the gloved hands of the Maniac, the Maniac Cop. His hands just coming out and snapping this one guy's neck. Just like 0.3 seconds. It's a very quick, sufficient kill, and I rather enjoy that.
Yeah. So as I've been saying, I think this is a really good sequel. It's got a lot more action than the original. I mean, it's probably not as suspenseful as the original, just because we know now who the character is, and we know a lot more about them. It's got some good kills, some good stunts in the movie. It's just a good ride. I give the movie a 9 out of 10, and this is one of those movies that goes back to even when, back in the VHS days where I was a little kid, so I was even watching it back then.
Speaking of a good ride, one thing I didn't mention was the scene in which a character is handcuffed to a car. Yeah. And that scene, when I was watching it, I was like sitting on the edge of my seat like, oh hey, this is interesting. So yeah. That seems like a moderately terrifying position to be in, and it's done really well. I agree that this movie is mostly as good as the original. I, of course, would always recommend the original more, just because of the addition that this movie throws in, the talkative serial killer guy, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't particularly like the character, and eventually something happens to the character that shot him up, so I was okay with that. It's a pretty good movie, not quite as good as the original, but probably worth a watch. I'd rate it above average, just slightly above a 7.5. I would probably round it down though to a 7 as opposed to moving it to an 8. So it's still a pretty good movie, just not necessarily anything that blows anybody away.
And also just like to add that this is not a Christmas movie. It seems to come up on a lot of Christmas movie lists just because it has a Christmas tree in the background of one scene, which you barely even notice. So just throwing that out there, this is not a Christmas movie.
Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
It's definitely more of a Christmas movie than this one.
Okay.